This is Internet Marketing.
Hello and welcome to the Internet Marketing Podcast brought to you by Site Visibility. I'm your host, Scott Colnut, and with me today is Sabrina Chevannes, Managing Director of Complex Creative. And we're going to be discussing what do you learn from an MBA? And a little bit of context for our listeners before I bring Sabrina into the podcast. So I spoke to Sabrina on my podcast, The Advertising Hour, about a year ago now, I think. And we were discussing really the topic of authenticity in marketing. Complex Creative leads with the tagline, no bullshit marketing. And so we were having a fun conversation about what it means to lead a no BS agency and what it means to lead with authenticity. We described a lot of Sabrina's history and experience in that episode. So we discussed a little bit about the creation of chess books for children, a little bit about Sabrina's chess career. And the reason that I thought Sabrina would make an interesting guest for today's episode is because I saw that Sabrina recently completed an MBA. I know Sabrina is committed to self-development and that she would have some strong opinions and some well-considered opinions on self-development and learning. And I know that Sabrina has also recently contributed to a marketing module within an MBA, which we're going to discuss as well. So lots to talk about, lots to learn, and welcome to the podcast, Sabrina.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So I would like to start with an early part of your journey. There's going to be lots that we talk about, kind of different aspects of your career in this episode. But I know that many years ago you were studying to be a doctor, but you had an enthusiasm, a desire to run your own business. And I really want to know how that journey played out. And so how long ago was it at the time that you were studying to be a doctor? You know, what made you want to run your own business? And then when you eventually made the decision to throw yourself into entrepreneurialism, talk me through some of the decisions that you had to make and how that journey looked.
Well, I think my desire to run my own business actually started before I went to medical school. From a very early age, I wanted to run my own business. I just didn't think it was possible. I'd always liked the idea of becoming a doctor. I'm from a very medical family. Everyone in my family does medicine of some kind. I've got two brothers who are both doctors as well. So, when you have older brothers or older siblings of any kind, they're usually a great influence on you. And so I did want to follow in their footsteps. I've also got no one in my family who is an entrepreneur or runs a business. So I just didn't think it was actually feasible. But I distinctly remember being 16 and we were doing, the Young Enterprise program at school. And I remember winning a national award for that. And, I sort of started a little business there and did really well with it. It was really profitable. I just massively enjoyed it. And, I've always had that passion for it. I just didn't think it was actually possible. But I went to medical school. And, I really enjoyed medicine and I still find it a fascinating topic. But whilst I was there, I moved to London. I was originally from Birmingham and I moved to London and, everything was suddenly 3 times more expensive. I was a poor student. I was like, oh my God, what on earth do I do for money? And, also being very sociable, I wanted to be out in the pub every night and go out all the time. And so I couldn't really do that as a poor student. And so obviously I wanted to get creative and try to earn some money. And so I looked to kind of do tutoring for exams and things like that. And I, started off doing that sort of thing, teaching kids, preparing them for GCSEs and A-levels. And it was good money, especially for a student. Eventually, I just got so many students doing that I ended up turning it into a business, like accidentally. And that's how it all happened. It was all kind of accidental. And I wanted to do it properly, and so I ended up like trying to promote that as a company. I then, needed to do marketing for that. I ended up needing to do a website for that. And that's kind of how I stumbled into the web design world, which obviously we can come back to. But it was, it was that accidental thing. And then I started to do a bit of research on it, and I found how easy it was to actually start a company. What I didn't realize at the time was how difficult it is to run a company and maintain it. I was like, wow, I can pay like 50 quid to this company, and I'm a business owner. This is fantastic. Got my certificate of incorporation. It was brilliant. And then, suddenly ended up with loads of fines from HMRC because I hadn't filed accounts and stuff like that. It was a really naive journey, I definitely have to say. But so that's how I kind of stumbled upon entrepreneurship. And I did all this whilst I was still at medical school. And so that was like what my first couple of years of medical school looked like. And then, by the time I got deep into it, I was earning a lot more money running that company than I ever would being a doctor. And I kind of got addicted to that lifestyle of entrepreneurship. And I was traveling whenever I wanted to, and it just, the freedom was fantastic. And so that's what made me kind of leave medicine and not look back and kind of go on this journey as an entrepreneur.
And what year are we talking when that fork in the road moment came about and you kind of had to make the decision, hey, do I carry on with medicine or do I throw myself into this business that I've created?
That was 2008.
2008. Okay. So that was your first business at that time?
Yes, that was.
And I'm really interested, you mentioned as you were talking there that you never really had anyone in your family that you didn't know that it was an option to create your own business because you had no one in the family that had gone through that process. And I'm just interested in that aspect of learning and finding mentors and finding inspiration. So are you able to speak on kind of how you got started? Was it just learning on the job and learning as you go?
Yeah. It was being really bad at it for a while is what it was. Google is always your best friend for that stuff. And that's literally what I did. I just Googled everything. I didn't know anyone who had started their own business. I didn't have any friends, families, anyone. So like I didn't know what to do. I just read up a lot on it. And back then there also wasn't YouTube channels and tutorials, and there was all these different things that you could do now. You've got every resource at your fingertips. But back then you didn't. And I bought books from Amazon. I remember startups.co.uk being a thing because I was on that a lot. So that was still around. And I think, I basically just Googled every resource I could about how to start a company, what the best formation for the company was, the pros and cons of it. Like I just went through everything, and did it all myself. And again, when it came to designing the website, I had a bit of a design background, but I'd never built a website before. And I remember having to do it for the company. And again, I went online, tried to find some people, hired some supposed web developers. And this is where my distrust of web developers came in, was that every single person I hired were really bad. They just didn't know what they were doing. And, I'd ask for corrections and they said it wasn't possible. I'd Google it and find the answer how to do it in like 5 minutes. So I was like, what? How are you a professional? I'm paying you this much money and you can't do this job. So that's when I ended up doing it myself. I literally decided to take over and Google how to edit the rest of my website to get it to launch. And I thought, that's ridiculous. And I then wanted to improve on the website. So I further taught myself and I literally bought HTML and CSS for Dummies from Amazon to do that. And I bought that book and started off doing it. And then gradually I just kept on teaching myself. And that's how I ended up in the world of web design, which is kind of crazy thinking about it too. But it is all self-taught. And yeah, and I think that the mental thing's a really interesting angle because I feel like whenever I listen to podcasts or audio books or, about successful business people, they always say, oh, I had someone as a mentor. They would say, I looked up to so-and-so, whether it was my uncle or grandfather or whatever. They had someone in their life who could inspire them to go on this journey. I didn't have that. Don't get me wrong, I have incredible parents who have been supportive of me all my life. And, for example, my dad has always been the person I'd call up if I ever needed anything, and he's so knowledgeable and would be able to support me on that sort of thing. But he's never run his own business. However, he did do an MBA back in the day. So, he does have that sort of background. So he would be the person I spoke to, but he didn't, and he's fair bit older than me and doesn't really understand technology these days and has no idea how to use digital marketing or anything like that. So it was definitely an interesting journey. And I did try to reach out to people online. And what I found, and I find is still the case, that it's very difficult to find a mentor that isn't actually, I haven't come across one. So if anyone does know of one, I'd love to hear about it. But I haven't ever come across a platform which actually just connects people up to mentors in the business world. I've seen smaller platforms which are more niche that does pair up mentors, which is fantastic. But, just an overarching place where you can just find a business mentor and they can seek out someone who aligns with your values and your goals and your skill set and actually just mentor you along the journey. People have been there and done that. And there just isn't anywhere that's still like that. And so I've still struggled to this day. So this is 14 years later, and I still don't have a mentor who I can turn to and just ask for advice. And that's really quite depressing, to be honest.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot that I want to break down there, but on your, I guess, your question or statement about is there a platform, I think that's come up in some podcasts that I've recorded before. And as far as I'm aware as well, there aren't any. There are some smaller niche mentorship programs. And at one point, LinkedIn did try to roll out a mentoring matching kind of system or functionality. So you would enter your details on LinkedIn, you would note who you're looking for and what kind of career you wanted, and it would try to match you with people, with mentees and mentors. And you got a selection of people that you could speak to, and the service was entirely free. And I remember this was a couple of years back now, I exchanged a few messages with people who I thought had interesting careers and I wanted to speak to. But the responses were kind of minimal from people, and I don't really know why they signed up. And it felt weird on LinkedIn asking for people's time entirely for free. And I don't know if they still run that program, but that did exist a couple of years ago.
I think I do remember that. I think also Facebook tried to do it as well.
Right.
I was definitely in a Facebook mentorship program, but like you said, I didn't have many people reach out to me, and I don't think many people knew it existed, and so it wasn't really done very well. And I think the people who did reach out to me weren't actually looking for mentorship, but were looking for free services. And that's what I found. It was abused. And so maybe that's why LinkedIn didn't continue with it, is because I got a lot of people just going, oh, I see you do websites. As my mentor, could you perhaps just build me a website? And I'm like, no, that's not quite how it works. And so yeah, I think that's maybe why it didn't work. But I think it would be a fantastic initiative. And it's something I'd love to do, is just to pair people up with mentors. And I know that a lot of people would be happy to kind of give up their time to be able to give back to people.
It's really interesting as well, because I would consider you successful in a lot of things that you've done. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of that success as we continue. But, you're successful and you're still saying, hey, I'm still open to the idea of having a mentor. I'd still like that person for either guidance or to bounce ideas off of, or just to learn from their experience. And yet 14 years on or something, you haven't necessarily been able to find that person. So I think what's maybe just on that topic, what would you seek out a mentor for at this stage? And the reason I ask is because objectively, you are very smart and very successful. We've talked about that on the previous podcast of authoring books. I didn't discuss it in the intro, but I know you're a member of MENSA. You're an international chess master. There are lots of indications that you're very smart and very successful. And so I think people might assume, hey, you don't need a mentor, but is that something you would like to seek out?
Oh, 100%. And I think that, it's very, very kind of you to say all those things. And, I think that everyone defines success in a different way as well. So whilst I may seem successful to one person, another person probably doesn't think I am successful. And, and I think it's all about how you feel. And I know that I will always want to find a way to improve in any area that I can improve in. And I think that having a mentor isn't to do with whether someone's successful. I think that whoever you just define as the most successful person in the world can probably benefit from mentorship, because there are some areas where they may be weak, and that's where mentors come in. And I think personally for me, I'd like to find a mentor who has been through this entrepreneurship journey themselves as well, perhaps started out with having no experience like myself. Like, I think that whilst I do look back and think, okay, I've done pretty well for myself considering I didn't really know anything, and didn't have anyone there to support me. I didn't get given £1 million loan by someone, as you know, like, but you know, to start their own business, I did do it from scratch, and I think that I'm quite proud of where I've come for those reasons. So I'd like to find someone who also did that, because I think, again, you know, you could find someone who can help you with various aspects, but they don't really understand like what you came from. I think that that's why having people whose values align and, you know, the morals align as well is very, very important, because you approach things differently. So I'd love to have someone who's been through that. I'd love to have a female mentor who could understand the difficulties of being a business owner as a woman. And, you know, I'm sure I've spoken about it before, as, you know, unfortunately, I still receive a lot of sexism as an agency owner, which is ridiculous considering it's 2022 now. But also I'd love to have a person of colour for the exact same reason. But, you know, how would I find, like, this is it. What are the chances that I'm going to find a female business owner of colour who's been through similar stuff to what I have, who's happy to give back their time and mentor me on their journey? It's a very slim market that I'm looking in. I'm not saying they have to tick every box, obviously, but that would be the ideal person. But I think a mentor just needs to be someone who's patient, who obviously is knowledgeable, but is empathetic and is willing to give back. I think that's it. Like, I think a lot of there are people out there who go on mentor journeys because they get paid. There are some mentorships, obviously, which are paid, and it's clear that they're doing it for the money and they don't actually want to help that person, or they sign up to do a voluntary one, but then they actually, like, you know, what they do is they just cancel on the person because they don't see it as being important, and then they actually make that person feel a bit diminished as a result, that they just keep getting cancelled on, and they don't seem as important. So you really do need a mentor who genuinely wants to help that person, who genuinely enjoys giving back and help, and wants to educate the next generation of people. And I think that that's very rare. So that's probably why it's difficult to find mentors.
You're in an interesting position, actually, because there are lots of reasons there that you've described about what you'd find beneficial in a mentor, but you're also in a position where you're able to mentor people yourself. And I know that you have. I guess I'm curious to learn about, what are the benefits to you from being a mentor yourself? What do you learn from that process?
I think that people do things for different reasons. As I said, like, I think the reason why a lot of mentors don't work is because they're doing it for the wrong reasons. I've always enjoyed teaching. This is a huge part of who I am. I still do a lot of teaching. We talked about chess. I still do a lot of chess coaching. I'm always teaching in my agency. I always love hiring juniors and training them up. This is just, I love to pass on knowledge that I have. I love to see people grow. And I think because I genuinely want to see that person succeed, that's why I think I enjoy mentorship. I really do believe in giving back. I think that's the only way that life works, is that people give back, you know, what they've achieved in life. And I think that you can also learn stuff as a mentor. And I think that, you know, I get asked questions by mentees all the time that make me think about things and that make me sort of, you know, self-reflect. And I actually discover a lot about myself on my own business journey. And it helps me actually come up with ideas about my business and why I do things in my business, and perhaps ways I can improve because of the questions they're asking. So from a selfish perspective, mentees actually have a lot to give as well. And I think that you don't realize, but you can learn something from everyone, no matter how inexperienced they are. If you actually just open up your mind to realize that people have something to give, everyone has something to give. And I think that, again, some mentors go into the whole mentorship thinking they are the experienced ones, they are the ones that know everything, and the person who they're mentoring is beneath them. And again, that's the wrong attitude, and it will come across inappropriate when they're doing the mentoring. But, you know, if you're just seeing someone that you're trying to help along the journey, but you can also help each other, I think that's a much nicer relationship and a much more successful one.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the major benefits of being a mentor is that ability to it's seeking different perspective, which helps you to broaden your critical thinking skills. So that process of self-reflection just opens you up to, as you said, new ideas, new ways, and maybe to run your own business. That's the selfish part of it. One of the things that probably prevents a lot of people from wanting to become mentors or being able to become mentors. We talked about the platform problem, and maybe there isn't an actual technology solution to that problem. But it's also that fear of thinking sometimes that you don't know much. So, what have I got to share with anyone else? How are you able to encourage your team and other people that you work with to share their knowledge and kind of commit to that value that you just discussed about really life being about sharing on and passing on knowledge from one person to the other?
That's a really good question. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said a lot of people worry that they don't have anything to give. I think that's the most common thing, is that people, and I've said this myself, I said, well, why would anyone want me to be their mentor? Because I'm still on a journey of learning myself. So what can I give to people? But that's what I'm saying. No matter how inexperienced you are, you always have something to give. And that's the message I try to communicate with my team. Because again, on an everyday basis, your team produce work, and they may not want to contribute. They may not want to give their opinions on something because they don't think that they are good enough to give an opinion on something. But I always encourage us from day one that we're a very collaborative team. I want everyone to give an input, and I will ask people, even if it's their first day on the job and they've had no experience, I'm like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, there were no stupid ideas here. Like, if you come up with something that doesn't work categorically, I'll explain why, and then you're actually educated from that and know next time, but you've contributed. And I will always keep that, openness within the team to encourage people to contribute, because the worst that's going to happen is that they're going to learn something. And it's them feeling valued. And I always try to make sure that no matter what people have done in our team, I will let them know when they've done something well, and that they do have something to give. And if something comes up that is an area where another team member can help, I would be like, oh, so-and-so is a specialty, an expert in this, and, you should ask them. And even if I have more knowledge in that area, supposedly, I refer it on to them, because I think that that's a great teaching opportunity, and they feel valued, and it just helps all around. I think that's really nice. And I try to encourage that right from the get-go. And I do encourage self-learning and self-development within the team all the time as well. I think it's really important.
Yeah. So that's the part I want to get into next, which is a good transition. You're setting this up for me, which is great. So I was thinking about, it sounds like, as both a managing director, but just someone in a leadership or a teacher position, one of the things that you do is just repeat yourself. It sounds like you repeat that to help create a culture of learning, and the fact that this is the culture that you want. You want a culture of knowledge share. Is there anything that you can practically point to that you do within your company to encourage that knowledge share? Or is it really just a case of, it sounds like two things. The first is repeating yourself and repeating that message. And the second is it's kind of facilitating the conversations between people. It sounds like that's a key part of your role.
Yeah, I think it's also a lot of it is understanding your team. So you have to meet with them regularly and understand what they actually want to get out of their role and what they want from the job. Because from my experience, I've noticed that I think I know my staff and what they want and why they accepted the job there, but actually it's not the case, or it changes, 3 months down the line, because again, everyone's developing. And so, I always, as I said, repeat to yourself, and like letting people know that I am here to support you if you want to learn anything new. And we have an unlimited training budget, for example, at our company, but no one uses it half the time because they don't think to use it. They don't think they don't think, oh, I need to learn anything right now. I need to go on this course or anything. I think that also there's like the negative connotation of school. Like not many people enjoy school life and they think, oh, this is like going back to school again. So it's dressing it up in a different way. And, if I were to approach one of my employees and I found a course for them that I think they would really benefit from and really enjoy, I approach them and say, hey, do you want to go on this? And every time they'll be like, oh, that looks really good. And they want me to sign them up. But if I ask them, oh, is there anything out there that you want to look at? They don't. And I'm like, you've got a limited budget to spend here basically on training, but they're like, they're not interested. So I think it's again, it's a culture thing. I don't think as well, like, in the UK, I don't think this consistent, like, I don't think that continual learning is something that's so prominent in the UK. I think, for example, maybe that's more prominent in Asian culture. I think, they are always looking to self-improve, and a lot of learning is built in from a young age. I don't think that's the same case over here. I think it's changed a lot now with modern day courses that you can just watch online, and it's a lot more accessible. But I do think that people, and I think maybe also a lot of people think learning stuff is geeky. I think it's got that negative stigma to it, and so people think that if you're like studying or learning something, then you're a bit of a dork, and I think that's the problem, and I think that needs to change. And so if you dress it up in a different way, I think it then becomes a bit better. But again, I think that people don't see the benefits of learning directly, and that's the problem.
It leads me nicely to actually you and this position that you're in. As you've talked that through, again, you're in a really interesting position because you've got this academic experience, but then there's also a lot of self-learning. So yeah, you have the structure of further education, but then also just a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. And that's a really interesting position to be in, because sometimes I don't necessarily meet people. I typically meet either academic people or people who have learned, self-taught maybe. And talking that through, it sounds like there's a third thing that you do, and that's practice what you preach. So it's not like you're asking your team, or you're not mentoring people and saying, hey, you need to learn, when you're not doing it yourself. You're actually very committed to your self-development and learning, which leads nicely to the MBA. And I'm really interested, thinking that through, thinking about your career. You had lots of success outside of further education, but then you recently completed an Executive MBA in business administration and management. And I'm just curious to know what led you to that. Why did you decide to do that? On the outside, just looking in, you're successful up to that point. So I'm interested to know what you led to it, and then maybe what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, as I said, again, everyone defines success in a very different way. And whilst a lot of people do think I'm successful, personally, I think that I could be a lot more successful. There are so many goals that I'd like to achieve. There's so many things I'd like to do. And I am always looking to be a better manager, because I do really care about my team. And I don't want my team to be unhappy, or, I want Complex Creative to be a place where everyone's excited to get up to and go to in the morning. I mean, that might be too much to ask for, but you know what I mean, in terms of this is a place where you're going to be spending most of your time. And so I want people to enjoy being there. So I need to know what I can do to produce that working environment that I would like to have. Yeah. And whilst, like you said, I have learned a lot along the way, I've never learnt it officially. And you're right in the fact that I've also only really met people who are either academic or self-taught. There's very few who've done both. But I think you need both. And I've always had that. And maybe it is because of the way I was brought up as well, that to be on proper education, everyone in my family went to uni and things like that. And, I believe in that. I believe that you should be taught, have a good foundation and be taught things properly. But I don't think it just stops there. I think that you need really, really practical implications and to continually learn. It's like, for example, people take driving lessons and they learn how to drive, but then I don't think you actually learn how to drive until you get into a car by yourself on a road without. That's when you really start to learn how to drive. I would distinctly remember the difference, because I found driving lessons easy, and I did 20 hours, jumped in a test and passed straight away. It was really easy. But the moment I went and got a car the next day, I'm done. That's what I'm like. I was like, right, this is awesome. I went and bought a car the next day and then drove it home. But oh my God, that drive home was the most terrifying drive of my life. And it's just like, I was like, oh my God, I don't have someone as a safety net here. What do I do? And I remember like going out into central London for the first time ever, and no one would let me through. And I'm sitting there like for like 10 minutes before, like, I might realize I had to drive into the middle of the road before someone lets me through. All these things you don't actually learn until you learn by being on the road. Your instructor doesn't teach you that stuff because that's not technically correct. So I think that's the same sort of thing. Like, I believe that you have a structured education and then you learn things on top of that. And so I didn't have that with entrepreneurship, and I've kind of got to this stage without knowing anything properly. And so I've done it in the backwards of how I think you should do it.
Yeah.
But I got to this point and thought, yes, okay, I've done quite well, but I could do a lot better. And I'd like to have official training in all of these things. And so I decided to do an MBA because I felt like all the things that you learn when you're doing an MBA are the things that would help me become a better company director, and run a business more successfully. And I'd be able to check whether I'm doing things correctly as it is and learn new things and just do things in a much more structured and organized way. And that's the reason why I did it.
The word structure has come up a couple of times there, and it was one thing that was kind of prominent in my mind as you were talking there as well. And it's, for you said you've done it kind of a different way around than you maybe recommend, but it's kind of giving you a platform really to reach the next level in whatever your career and your aspirations are. And I was thinking about sometimes when you learn, sometimes you don't learn new things, but it may reinforce things that you think you already knew, but you maybe weren't 100% certain. It gives you that little bit of confidence. Is it fair to say that going through this process of securing your Executive MBA, that maybe it gave you that confidence, to that assurance that you were on the right path anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the best things about it, actually. And I think there is a pro in doing it in this order because you already have knowledge, and actually you can go into the MBA with specific company goals in mind that you would like to be able to achieve, or experience that you've had, and almost get solutions for those problems that you've had prior to that. And I think that if you were doing it first without any company experience, you're basically learning theory but none of the practical applications. So in some ways I do like the fact that I've done it in this order. And yes, you're right, I did a few things, I learned a few things, and I thought, oh, fantastic, I'm doing it correctly, this is exactly what I do and I'm doing it right. So it gives you the confidence to do those things again, but at least you know now that you've done it correctly. I think that this largely comes down to the fact that I'm also a solo founder. I think people who have co-founders, they have partners, they've got each other to bounce ideas off. So if you've got an idea, you can check with your business partner that's the right decision to make, and you're a little bit more confident because you've got someone there for you if things go wrong. As a solo founder, you don't have that. You're making every decision by yourself. Again, if I had a mentor, that would be slightly different. But you're basically making every decision yourself. And if things go wrong, you have to solve that yourself. And so it's really, really hard. And so that's why I felt that I needed this official structured learning so that I could feel that I was qualified to make these decisions and do these things, even though, like you said, I've been doing this for over a decade, but I still feel like I am more qualified to make these decisions and run my business now that I've got this MBA under my belt.
The reassurance and the structure, it completely outweighs the vanity benefits of just saying that you have this thing. It's actually, you haven't mentioned the fact that, you haven't mentioned at all as you were talking the vanity aspect of it. Because I know that, some people they'll maybe explore higher and further education for the vanity benefits, or because they think it's just the thing that they should do rather than the thing that they need to do. But for you, it's actually the benefits of structure and maybe reassurance. Is that fair?
That's very fair. Like that doesn't even come into my head, although that is a lot of what other people do as well. You're right. And a lot of people be like, oh, because I've got an MBA, because I've got a PhD, and they drop it into every conversation they can, to be honest. And no, that's definitely not the driving factor of it at all. I mean, I don't really care that if people know I've done that or not. It was purely to learn and to understand, to just be better at my job, and to be able to run a better company and provide better services for my clients and just make a better workplace for my staff. Really, that's the reason why.
And is there anything that stands out to you from your MBA that you can pinpoint and say whether it gave you a new perspective on a topic that was already top of mind for you, or whether it just reinforced, hey, I'm going on the right lines. Is there anything that stands out to you as kind of a key lesson or couple of lessons from the completion of the MBA?
I'd say the data aspect. And I think
Right.
this comes in, a lot of people ask, the question, oh, if you could give your former self like 10 years ago a business tip, what would it be? And I always say plan more, because I think, like I said to you, I just found out I could start a company and did it and went head first and didn't really think anything of it. And I think I approach that with a lot of things, and I don't really plan things properly. I just kind of like to go head first into it. And I definitely think that's the wrong thing to do. Since doing the MBA, and I think that this is also from the also discipline of doing it. That's another reason why I did it as well. Is I did the Executive MBA, which is supposed to be harder. The material's supposed to be more difficult. It's supposed to be for people more advanced in their career. Like, doing that alongside running a company, you need a hell of a lot of discipline to be able to do that, because it's not easy. And that in itself taught me to be really organized and plan more and to have that sort of skill. But all the modules that you do like accounting modules, you do statistics, you do things about management and project management, how you structure the company, and obviously like the strategy, the finance side of things. There's a lot of modules that you cover, but they also all come with data and structured, whether they're spreadsheets or whether they are strategy documents. They come with templates and ways of doing things that just make your life so much easier. And since I have completed it, what's so bizarre is that it's only been a little bit of time since I completed it, but since then, and I've done a business plan for previous businesses, but I've now officially done a business plan. That was like one of the biggest the projects I have to do at the end of it. And, I've redone my business plan. I've done a business plan for a client. I've now submitted a pitch deck for an investment project that I want to get invested. I've done like all my cash flow forecasts for next year based on all the different structures and the things that I've learned in that MBA. I've taken the templates that they've given me within that course and utilized them directly in my own business. And so for that in itself, I feel like I've just suddenly got this really organized business, and all the tools that perhaps a financial planner would have given me, a professional strategist, and NED, like all these people, I think that I would have paid thousands and thousands of pounds for their advice, and they basically just give you these tools. Wow. I basically obtained from the MBA, which is fantastic, really.
The question that comes to mind is, could you self-learn that stuff? And you can, but one of the aspects of self-learning that's really difficult is it is overwhelming if you don't have that foundation. And that's maybe also why, at least in my experience, I've seen a lot of people struggle, not with learning or the process of learning, but it's actually knowing what to learn and like where to start. And so it kind of gives you that, aside from structure, like a foundation or a starting point on what to learn next.
Absolutely. And you're right, it's completely overwhelming. And that's I think that's why I didn't really do anything in the beginning, because where do I start? And as you said, now especially there's a whole sea of information out there. Where on earth do you start? Like you would go onto YouTube, you watch a video, and then you get caught in the YouTube like algorithm. You'd be doing a whole funnel of videos that are not even relevant to your business. And also, how do you trust that material? Because everyone's putting their own material out there now, and how do you know whether they are actually experts in what they do or following bad advice? Like, you just don't know. Whereas if you're taking a degree from an actual certified institution, they've had to go through rigorous conditions to make sure that the quality of the material they're providing is actually good, so that you're learning the right thing. And I think that's really important as well, because at the moment, I don't know whether to trust. Like, if you read a blog article on something, how do you know what they're saying is actually accurate? And that's the thing. I've seen so many articles on things that are just completely untrue, but people are just putting content out there, and you can't stop that. So I think it's really difficult for people who are trying to be self-taught, because you might just be learning the wrong thing completely anyway. Apart from the fact that it is completely overwhelming, it's like, you don't even know if you're learning the right thing. So that's why I think that it's good to have a foundation, because then at least you know roughly whether what people talk about is correct, and you kind of have an idea of what to then learn. Like, so now I if I want to learn more about something, I kind of am more focused, and I know where to look, and I will get a more in-depth book or something on the topic and learn more then.
Was there anything as part of the MBA that you expected maybe to learn, particularly as a creative agency owner? So is there anything that maybe would have helped you that you expected maybe to be a module, or that, in hindsight, you think, oh, actually, they should really include that in the Executive MBA because it would really help creative agency owners, but it just doesn't exist right now?
Yeah, I think the more practical side of things. I mean, so with the MBA, I did, the core subjects, and you could do specialisms.
Yeah.
And I did one of the startup entrepreneurial specialisms. It was just too basic. And okay, obviously that's because I'm speaking with loads of years of experience as well, so it probably doesn't help. But I think that nothing can prepare you for what you actually do experience as a business owner. And I think that I love to have a course out there which actually, trains you for when do you hire your first member of staff, and how do you hire your first member of staff? Like, what do you look for in them? Like, how much should you pay them? Like, should you go junior and train them up? Should you go senior because they need less help, and you can invest more time? How do you know to make those decisions? That's a big decision. That's a big decision that people still don't know the answer to, but some guidance on that would be good. I think, it does a lot of stuff on finance. So, we cover a lot of things on finance. We cover a lot of things on accounting. But, within that finance, it's more budgeting. And it also talks about, it also covers, even portfolio theory and all that kind of stuff, capital structure. But what it doesn't do is say, what should you invest in your company when you're starting out? Should you put X amount of money down, or should you go get finance from somewhere? Should you go get a bank loan? Like, what should you do? At what stage should you do that? Those sort of things that I think are really, really practical questions that business owners are continually asking. I don't think there's anything out there in those courses that actually cover those topics, which I think would be really useful. But then, the problem is, does anyone actually have the answer to those things? That's the question.
Yeah, sometimes they're hard to articulate. You kind of have to experience them to know the answers, but and sometimes there is it's very difficult because there isn't a single answer. It depends on the context and the scenario you're in. So you're completely right. But maybe just like sometimes you don't need to know the answers necessarily. You just need the context or the awareness of what's likely to happen. So, this scenario, this is something that I talk about a lot actually, is that there are, particularly in marketing agencies, there are scenarios where they might only come up once every 5 years, but they're going to come up. They will come up. And so it's just having, you having that experience means that it will come up. And it's just helpful sometimes to pass on that information so that other people, it's not a surprise when other people experience it. They might, like you said, you might not know the answers to those things when they do come up, but at least people feel more prepared, maybe.
Exactly. And I think, for example, there's a module on, pricing and marketing and, how to sell your product or service to a customer. And obviously that's a theoretical side of things, like understanding your value, like communicating that and all that kind of stuff. But what it doesn't teach you is, for example, how to hold a conversation with someone about that. Like, if someone's actually asking about your service or product, how do you communicate it with them? Like, what do you do? And do some people go really hard, cheesy sell, and that's really off-putting. Like, they don't talk about, actually how to communicate your business with people in a normal conversation, that you can educate them, but at the same time not come across cheesy and salesy. It doesn't talk about how to handle an unhappy client, because you're going to get one at some point, and how do you handle that? Like, you don't sort of like be really defensive and snap back at them, because you never know what's coming back to you. You always want to maintain a good, healthy relationship even later down the line. And it doesn't tell you about all those practical side of things. And I think those things are really, really valuable, and you basically only learn those from experience. And I think that, like you said, these things are always going to happen in every business, and a heads up would be really nice, to be honest. That's what it is.
Well, taking this conversation full circle and in closing, I know that I don't know if you finished this or whether you're in the process of doing it, but you are helping to teach or contribute to a marketing MBA or a module in a marketing MBA. So I just wanted to close by asking you about that process. And, just before we started recording, we were talking about podcasting and it being conversational. And I was kind of laughing to myself because you were saying that you actually found it a difficult process to maybe structure your thinking and deliver it in a different way. It's not kind of what's most natural to you. Yeah, maybe if you can expand on that and just talk a little bit about what you're teaching and maybe that process of structuring your thoughts and how difficult that was.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it wasn't it was a hybrid. So whilst I'm teaching an MBA, I'm teaching a module in a marketing MBA, and I'm talking about marketing strategy. So obviously it's not an easy topic, it's a big topic as well. And it's a fantastically modern MBA where you actually can learn by watching videos of people who with experience talking about it. So that's myself on video talking about it. So it was a strange combination, because while the material had to be official teaching material, I also had to be conversational and still, interesting. And I think that, if someone was to sit down and say, write a university degree module on this, and it was just very formal written content, I find that easier because you've got time to do that, and it's very structured, and it's a very easy kind of it's a very formal kind of tone. Whereas this is a modern MBA, and you can sit there and watch videos and soak up the content really easily like that, which I thought was quite interesting. So I had to do it in a conversational style, but I couldn't just wing it like I do with most podcasts and, just have a conversation off the cuff, because I need to make sure I cover all the actual relevant points that are vital to someone's learning. And so I had to obviously prepare answers, but at the same time answer it in a conversational way. And so I didn't find it that easy, because I always feel like I've missed something because it's a big topic, and I always think, oh, I could have said that. I should have said that. I missed that. It's a really vital piece of information. I wish I'd gone back and said it. And, I wouldn't be able to do that unless I was reading off a script, and that just feels awful and unnatural. So I would never do that. And so I think it was the contrast of, wanting to be able to cover a lot and give as much value in the videos as possible, but also seem natural and conversational at the same time. I thought the combination was quite difficult.
And if anyone listening wants to find information on that MBA, is it out there? Are you able to share it?
Yeah, so it's with the Power MBA, and if you go to their website, which is just thepowermba.com, there's the digital marketing MBA there, and I'm one of the teachers on that. And there's also another section called Working with Agencies, and I'm one of the agency owners who's been interviewed for that section too, about my journey and some practical advice for anyone who wants to try and run their own marketing agency. And I talk about things in there. So just go onto thepowermba.com. They also have a kind of modern MBA there as well that's not just digital marketing. So if anyone wants to have the more business side of things, do check it out for sure.
And it's so funny because I know we're running out of time, and one of the things I thought I wasn't going to get to ask was about the Power MBA, because I keep seeing them advertised everywhere, and I've seen it kind of. You talked about it being a modern and maybe just a modern approach to the MBA, and that's what I see through their marketing. So just from a marketing lens, I'm aware of them through their great marketing. So it's really interesting to tie that up and know that you're a part of a marketing module within that program. So before we just close out, do you want to let our listeners know where else they can find out more about you and Complex Creative?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see our work and find out about the company at wearecomplexcreative.com. We're also on most social media platforms, so you can type in either We Are Complex Creative or just search for us on those platforms, and we are there: Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. And the same as me personally, I am on most platforms. You'll find me largely on Instagram at SabZyC, that's SABZYC. I'm on Twitter at @Chevannes, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, which is my full name. You can find me there. And those are the 3 most active networks I am on, and I'm always happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Sabrina, thanks so much for your time today. I know that the first week back is always really busy for everyone, so I appreciate you taking an hour out to speak with me. And I've learned a lot about MBAs and the process of self-development and learning, and you've helped to give me some different perspective on the matter and a really interesting conversation, so thank you.
No problem, thank you.
All right, this has been the Internet Marketing Podcast. Take care.